what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, January 30th, 2019, almost to the end of the month here. And we have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room ready to answer the phone. Put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations, opinions, whatever. So let's get right into it right now. I want to start with Venezuela. Well, actually, before I do that, I want to explain. Yesterday, the reason I was not able to do the show live is I had to take Claire down to Honolulu to a medical center there for some tests. And it's all... Hello? I don't know where that came from. Anyway, the news is good. Basically, her previous MRI had shown a mass anterior to the spine where she fractured her back, and they wanted a biopsy done on it. And we got her down there into the hospital, and they took the first CT scan to guide where the needle was going to go for the biopsy, and they said, it's gone. Whatever was there was just absolutely gone. And they just canceled the biopsy, and they let Claire out, and we came on home, and Claire and I celebrated. So it was all really, really good news. And so for those of you who've been emailing in, expressing your concern, thank you very much. And, the news was all good. Let's take a phone call now from Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I've got a new stock answer, Mike, for when someone asks me, so what do you think about Trump? My new stock answer is, and it doesn't mention him directly, but I think if someone thinks about it, it says a lot. And I think it's going to say a lot more over time. And culture for president.
Okay. I mean, at this point, I think Trump is going to be a one-term president. And I know a lot of people are going to be very critical of me for saying that. But at this point, yeah, I don't think he's going to have a second term.
I think it sends a message to Trump as well. And culture for president. That's my new stock answer.
Okay. You mean culture?
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot.
And culture.
We're going to let you go now, and there we are. Phone lines are open. Okay, so we're talking about Venezuela and this very obvious U.S.-backed coup d'etat. This Juan Guaido, and by the way, I was sent an email from somebody who says it is pronounced Guido, not Guido. I had heard Guido in a video from one of the leaders of the neighboring South American nations, and they were saying Guido, which is why I thought it was, but I've been corrected on it. It is Guido. So they had this meeting of the UN Security Council on Venezuela, and of course, basically, the U.S. with its permanent veto gets to do whatever it wants. And the United States has been after Venezuela since Hugo Chavez was elected 20 years ago. They want control of Venezuela's vast oil reserves, which are the world's largest. Venezuela is also rich in other minerals like gold, silver, molybdenum, copper, all of which U.S. corporations covet. And they don't want to go on in there and pay for it. It's just easier to, have the country invade and take the country of Venezuela over, which is what they're getting ready to do. But the State Department is out there saying the reserves are a stupendous source of strategic power, one of the greatest material prizes in world history. So that's how they're thinking about this. It's a prize. It's a prize. We're going to go on out. We're going to get the prize here. And Henry Kissinger once said that controlling oil is how you control nations, and oil is much too important a commodity to be left in the hands of the Arabs, although in this case it's the South Americans. But that's what's going on here. The United States covets that oil in South America. They don't want to pay for it. They're just going to take it, and that's exactly what's going on. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Joe in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, forgive me for being pedantic, but it's actually the surname is actually pronounced Guaido, Guaido, with the emphasis on the O.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike.
Why couldn't he call himself Smith or something that's easy to pronounce? That's what I want to know.
Or Rivera.
It's Rivero.
You say tomato, I say tomato. You say Guido, I say Guado. Let's call the whole thing off.
Absolutely, absolutely. But in my case, it's Rivero with an O.
Mike, in light of the recent tweet from John Bolton threatening Maduro with violence, if anything should happen to Guaido, I don't think I'd like to be in the shoes of Guaido, because I think he's worth more. He could be worth more dead than alive to the U.S.
I disagree with that. I mean, they've obviously been bringing this guy along and culturing him, if you will, and training him and getting him ready to step on in as the new puppet ruler. So no, I don't think the U.S. wants him dead at all. And that's why we're getting these tweets from Bolton saying that Maduro would cross a red line even if Guaido was arrested.
Okay. Well, I'm also surprised we haven't yet seen the CIA's sharpshooters that we did see in Venezuela about 10 years ago, and then also in Ukraine.
Yes.
So chaos, and to blame the government for this violence.
That may yet happen. I'm expecting that to happen very soon.
Yeah, and Mike, I'd also like to direct the viewers to go to The Last American Vagabond. There's a very interesting interview with Vanessa Beeley, and she provides shocking details on what's happening in France with the yellow vests. The level of violence against these people is just horrific.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't hear anything from the mainstream media.
No, the corporate media is not covering it at all. And they're not covering the protests. They're not covering the violence. They don't want the American slaves to get any uppity ideas from the yellow vests.
No, and there's actually an accompanying article from Vanessa Beeley on Mint Press, and she just catalogs these injuries to these people. I mean, awful, horrific eye injuries, losses of people have lost their hands from these rubber bullets and these grenades. And it's interesting is it seems like France is taking lessons from the Israelis.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it is incredible amounts of violence. But Macron wants to hang on to power, and he's trying to basically shove the French people back down into serfdom, and the French people don't want to go.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Joe. We're going to let you go. And the phone lines are open. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Getting on back to Venezuela. Pardon me. So right now, the military, for the most part, is standing with Maduro. What is the United States going to do? And you have to look at, Maduro's political survival. And right now it hangs upon whether Venezuela's armed forces choose to stand by him or desert him and support the National Assembly leader, Juan Guaido. And so far, the majority of the military are standing with Maduro. Some have defected. They're asking the United States for weapons. But the majority of the military are standing with Guaido. Now, apparently, Trump, in a meeting with Lindsey Graham, floated the military option. They're actually talking about invading Venezuela. They're going to have another war in Venezuela. Ooh, gee, another war to go with all the other wars that we've got here. And it's going to be very, very ugly because the United States does sort of okay in open desert territory. But if you remember Vietnam, they don't do very well in jungle. And outside of the urban areas, that's basically what you've got in Venezuela, jungle. And they're not going to do very good. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be an absolute disaster. But apparently Trump is seriously talking about that with Lindsey Graham. All right, the Venezuelan envoy to the United Nations is saying the U.S. is preparing for a military invasion of Venezuela. Gee, imagine my surprise. And basically saying that the U.S. is preparing for this invasion amid Washington's move to impose sanctions on the state-owned oil firm PDVSA in its harshest financial challenge yet to President Maduro. And basically questioning whether the U.S. administration had the moral authority to impose a diktat on Caracas. Well, of course they don't, but that's not going to stop them from doing that here. Now, here's the wild card. Russia is heavily invested in Venezuela. They're heavily invested in Venezuelan oil, and Russia is saying they will defend their Venezuelan oil assets by all mechanisms available to them. This is coming from Dmitry Peskov, spokesman for Russia's President Putin. And Russia's been keeping close ties with Maduro, has extended loans to Venezuela, including oil from Rosneft lending money to PDVSA. So Russia's been propping Venezuela up. They're heavily invested in there. So once again, we're looking at going into an area where we're going to be going up against Russia. And I don't think that's a really good idea. Now, the Canadian mining company Crystalex has won a U.S. court victory, allowing it to seize Venezuela's U.S.-based oil assets. The Canadian multinational is looking to claim U.S. $1.4 billion worth of compensation awarded in 2014 for the 2008 expropriation of the La Cristales mining installations by the government of Hugo Chavez. So they've been fighting this one in the court system for a long time, and the U.S. judge has now just said that Crystalex can now seize Venezuela's U.S.-based assets. So the cash grab is already going on here. Maduro is out there blasting the White House for trying to turn Venezuela into the Latin American equivalent of Vietnam. So I'm not the only person who's thinking this is going to be another Vietnam. And Maduro is saying, we will not let this happen. Unfortunately, I don't think it's really up to him. I think if the U.S. goes on in, it will be a mess. It will be another jungle war. It will be another Vietnam. And the United States, I think ultimately, as they did in Vietnam, they're going to lose because the United States is not very good at jungle warfare. Now, here's a story that came on out. This was over in the Miami Herald. Now they're trying to claim that Hezbollah is down there in Venezuela. That Hezbollah is now a terror threat in our hemisphere. Ooh, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. And basically starting out saying, the Hezbollah is a terrorist group. It's basically headquartered in Lebanon. It's got a foothold in Syria. Now they're saying, oh my goodness, it's coming over here to this hemisphere, and they're down there in South America. So they're trying to find some reason to sell you this war in Venezuela. Ooh, we got to get Hezbollah. We got to get Hezbollah. Ooh, Hezbollah bad. Hezbollah bad. So send us your children. We got to go after Hezbollah in Venezuela. Meanwhile, Washington has imposed sanctions against the Venezuelan state oil company PDVSA, seizing $7 billion in assets with a B. This is coming from Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin. And the U.S. is trying to force recognition of Juan Guaido, or however he pronounces his name, as president in Caracas. And Mnuchin said that the move to seize the $7 billion in assets is to help prevent the further diversion of assets by the former President Maduro. And Mnuchin is saying that sanctions will be lifted upon the expeditious transfer of control to the interim president or the subsequently democratically elected interim government. Now, wouldn't it be embarrassing if Venezuela held new elections and Maduro won again? Because he could. I mean, they're not demanding that he not run. So John Bolton came on in saying, we know what the legitimate government of Venezuela is, and it is our mission to make reality what the people of Venezuela want, which is complete and utter nonsense. This has to do with what the oil companies want, what the mining companies want, what the U.S. government wants. The people of Venezuela already made it clear what they want. They elected Maduro to be their president. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, this proves the confessions of an economic hitman and the new confessions of an economic hitman. What he's been saying, how it works, what we've always become, basically. We've always been like this since what? The 1800s?
Yes.
Right? And see, anybody who still supports Trump after this, it's crazy. I mean, you give them the benefit of the doubt because, you know, maybe they got... But now, Mike, like, this just should wake up everybody's eyes that Trump's not on our side.
No.
You know? I think, you know, I don't know what else to say. And then, you know what put icing on the cake, like I talked about the other day, is Elliot Abrams. The guy is a war criminal, and he was behind these death squads in Central America and Latin America, Mike, or Central America. I mean,
he was the cheerleader for the war in Iraq under Bush. He lied to Congress about Iran-Contra. And, yeah, I have to wonder, you know, what was Trump thinking that he gets this guy on board?
And, Mike, you realize, did you think about this? Now, if there is some kind of incursion and you got a mass exodus coming out of Venezuela and heading into the rest of the countries, well, guess what? Those people in those countries are going to be swarming in caravans to the Mexican border.
Yep, they absolutely are. And they're going to vote Democratic.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? Yeah, like you said, Trump can't, he can't turn this around because he is the ringmaker now of this. You know, he'll look weak, or the United States will look weak now by not doing anything now, you know? Like, I mean, Mike, of all the things going on in the Middle East, we've made a mess of that part of the world. Now we're going to make a mess out of Venezuela, and do you notice? No infrastructure fixing. No, where's the tax breaks for the little people? That ain't ever coming, Mike.
Nope.
Have a good show, Mike. I had it with Trump, Mike. Have a good show.
All right. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Absolutely in agreement with you on that one here. Okay. So anyway, we're talking about the new oil sanctions against Venezuela. And this basically, John Bolton announced the U.S. will freeze Venezuelan assets and block oil payments for Venezuelan oil imports to the U.S. This, by the way, is actually illegal under international law. But according to CEPR's Mark Westbrook, this will be another crippling blow to the country. Now, obviously, if the U.S. is going to stop paying for their Venezuelan oil imports, Venezuela needs to stop sending oil up here. But at this point, I think the damage is already being done. We've got to take a break here for some commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, CNN has been running a story talking about defectors from the Venezuelan military who are now appealing to the United States for military aid, weapons, bullets, bombs, whatever. But over at southfront.org, some very sharp-eyed individuals pointed out the uniforms being worn by these so-called defectors from the Venezuelan military are outdated. They have old patches that are no longer used by the current Venezuelan military. In other words, they're fakes. CNN went to a surplus store, bought some uniforms, and said, see, these are Venezuelan defectors. It's another fake here. Let's go back to the phones here to Rob in New York. Aloha, Rob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm just giving you a call about Venezuela. I generally agree with you that the United States should not be meddling in all these other countries everywhere around the world.
Yes.
But last night I watched a video by a girl that is a Venezuelan herself, and she kind of had a different perspective on the situation. She kind of put it in the perspective that Maduro is a dictator. He's been abusing his powers, and he basically eliminated their National Assembly, which is their Congress, basically because it was taken over by an opposing party. So she described that as if Trump shut down the House of Representatives because the Democrats took over and he didn't want it anymore. And then she said that he appointed his own new branch of government with all his friends that supported him. And at that point, she said their constitution rendered him an illegitimate president because he's abusing his powers. And she said that the United States didn't, just appoint Guido or whatever his name is, and he was the leader of the National Assembly, so he was next in command because Maduro abused his power and became illegitimate.
Actually, he was second in line for the succession. Yeah.
So, I don't know the specifics of that, but it does seem like Maduro has kind of been abusing his powers and I'm sure, the United States is...
Yeah, but isn't that the problem of the Venezuelans to fix? Why is it our problem? We've had problems here in the United States that are not being taken care of.
I completely agree. I don't think we should be sending troops. I don't think we should be doing any of that. But if the United States is, recognizing Guaido as the leader, and that might be legitimate due to the way their constitution works.
I think, first of all, what's been going on in Venezuela, a lot of it has to do with the economic war that the United States has waged over the last 20 years. First against Hugo Chavez and then against Maduro, because they covet Venezuela's mineral wealth. But as far as the conditions in Venezuela or any other country, it's not really our problem to deal with. And our government really doesn't have any business going into these other countries and changing their governments around, expecting we the people to pay for it and our children to die for it.
I completely agree. I hope they don't send any troops or military action, but I'm not as against the United States necessarily recognizing this Guido, it sounds like. If, Maduro, it seems like there is some internal movement to support this guy as well.
Maduro just came out and recognized Hillary Clinton as the legitimate president of the United States.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anyone can recognize whoever they want, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly my point here. It's really not our business, to be going around and saying that we recognize this leader and not that leader. And when you look at the United States history of going into the other countries and changing the leadership, that's why these countries all hate us. It's not because we have freedom. It's not because we have Disneyland. It's because the U.S. government has got a bad habit of mucking about with other people's countries. And the other countries just really don't like it. And it is totally unjustified.
Yeah, I agree. We shouldn't be sending troops or anything. But at this point, if there's two different people that are claiming they're, the rightful leader of the country, and there is some constitutional backing as to why Guaido is the leader, it sounds like.
Maduro won the election.
The United States.
Maduro won the election.
He did,
and Jimmy Carter says the Venezuelan elections are among the most honest and transparent in the entire world. Their election system is more honest than ours is.
Yeah, I mean, ours definitely has its issues, and from just what she said, they only had a 20% turnout at their last election, and a lot of people were basically forced through violence into voting for Maduro, or else they'd be put in prison or executed. So, I mean, I'll have to double check the facts and everything, but I was just a little surprised to hear this account from someone who is a Venezuelan herself.
Well, don't forget, there's a lot of propaganda being thrown out there right now to try and lure, people who don't really know into sympathy for Guaido and the regime change. So you do have to be very, very careful. Anyway, Rob, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones to Sebastian in Sweden. Aloha, Sebastian. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I would like to just speak about the Venezuela elections. From what I heard, you have to have a photo ID plus a fingerprint.
Yes.
Now, we don't even have to have that here in Sweden. We need a pho ID. We don't need, so I think it's, I don't know if this guy they didn't want to, they didn't even want to go, they weren't even in the elections because they boycotted, for what I heard. But it's their fault then. They should have went there and, that's democracy. They had a chance to be voted in.
Yeah, they did.
Hello?
They did. But the bottom line is, Venezuela held elections. The elections are honest and transparent. Maduro won. And if there were people who were really opposed to Maduro, they should have gone out and voted for the other guy.
Exactly. That's why I think it's a shame if America goes to another Vietnam. Like you said, it would be another Vietnam. I had a few friends that were lost there, so I know.
Yeah, so did I. And, America does not do well in jungle warfare. They never have.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike.
Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. We're going to switch over to Lenny in California. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I would like to retort Rob's comment about hearing someone from Venezuela. I remember hearing someone from Kuwait saying how the Iraqis had stormed Kuwait and emptied babies out of incubators on the floor, and it was all run by Hills and Knowlton out of Orange County. It was all a propaganda thing to justify going into Iraq the first time and doing what they did.
Yep.
Okay. Now I'll give him a fact. Okay, and I have to question the so-called person who was from Venezuela who said there was a 20% turnout. No, there was a 46% turnout in the voting in Venezuela. Jimmy Carter, among other national observers, observed and said it was the most honest and fair elections in the world ever held. Okay, only America with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton had a 47% turnout, 1% more. So if I know this and I'm from America, and this person who's supposed to be from Venezuela don't know this, I have to question who in the hell she is. And Rob, you need to do your own homework and stop letting yourself being propagandized by people who do not have your best interests at heart. Now, as far as Venezuela being in bad economic straits, yeah, some of it is their fault, okay? But let's face it, the Rothschild banking system has had their foot on the neck of this country, and the U.S. is the enforcer.
Yes.
Okay. Now it's the U.S., France, Great Britain. I mean, what the hell kind of country are you? You holding someone's gold and won't return it to them. It's outright thievery. So stop patting yourself on the back and telling yourself how great you are, because you're not. You're right out thugs, and your thuggery continues here into the next century. But I give it up to the people of Venezuela and Maduro, and he's got to be strong. He doesn't have the charisma that Chavez had. So, but he's got to be strong, and I hope that Russia sticks with him. And I think China has like $20 billion invested. So my thing to Russia, China, North Korea, everybody else who's on the chopping block, if you don't stand with these people, you're gonna be next. So you might as well stand up for something because the world is going all to hell anyway. Thank you, Mike. I'm a little pissed off, but I just can't stand it when someone calls in and gonna tell me what someone else said. What kind of homework have you done yourself?
Well, thank you for the phone call. Thank you for the information and the clarification. And we're going to let you go here. So the phone lines are open again. Okay. So apparently Donald Trump has phoned Guaido and congratulated him on becoming the president of Venezuela, which technically he isn't yet. He's declared himself the interim president, but he hasn't won an election. Of course, the EU was telling Maduro, you've got to have new elections. Maduro said no, they just had elections, which he won. But again, they're trying to build all this international pressure on Maduro to step down, and it doesn't look like he's going to do it. And as Lenny was saying here, he's got Russia on his side, he's got China on his side. And, you know, they've got tremendous financial investments in Venezuela they're not going to walk away from. Now, Maduro has already arrested more than 700 of his opponents, but he's not touching Juan Guaido. And basically, he's not touching Guaido because of warnings that he's getting from the U.S. That Guaido is now Venezuela's legitimate leader, and that any harm to him would be crossing a dangerous red line. Excuse me. So, getting on back here, Venezuelan army defectors coordinate over WhatsApp and ask Trump for freedom weapons. And again, this is the story that there are defectors from Venezuela's army who are loyal to self-declared President Juan Guaido. They're calling on the Trump administration to arm them. Excuse me. To arm them in what they refer to as their quest for freedom. And they're strongly opposed to the United States conducting a broad military intervention. But as that story we just mentioned from South Front says, the uniforms these people are in are outdated. They're no longer actually used. Okay. Somebody just sent in an email saying in Venezuela, it was the opposition that called for boycotting the election. Maduro won by a landslide. The third branch of the government, the Supreme Court, ruled in favor of Maduro against the parliament. The U.S., Canada, UK, and Germany, and Lithuania are supporting a coup d'etat in Venezuela. Guaido simply declared himself president as head of the parliament. It's just another people power revolution against the Venezuelan constitution. And the article Guaido cited for usurping power had to do with election fraud, but the opposition boycotted the entire election, so they have no right to dispute the election results. Russia, China, Turkey, etc. say the U.S. just wants Venezuela's oil. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, along with the copper, molybdenum, and so forth and so on. Now, getting on back to the starting of a covert war there, apparently there's an exiled Venezuelan colonel, Colonel Oswaldo Garcia Palomo, and apparently he was arrested trying to sneak across the border in what is suspected to be a clandestine operation to organize and arm opposition to Maduro, to basically create a paramilitary force to take down the government of Venezuela. And they busted him here. Again, we have Elliot Abrams is back doing his regime change in Venezuela. He's come out of the shadows. And again, this guy, his background, he was the cheerleader for the Iraq War under Bush. He lied to Congress about Iran-Contra. This guy's got blood all over his hands. And I'm wondering why Trump has brought him in. So, I don't know. Anyway, getting on over to Syria. Apparently there are artillery duels erupting in the Idlib deconfliction zone, and it's escalating. Increased number of artillery duels and clashes between pro-government fighters and militants taking place on a daily basis. On the 29th, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, that's yesterday, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra and Jaish al-Izza, reportedly attacked positions of the Syrian Arab Army in the villages of Man and Atshan in the northern Hama. Both sides are accused of using heavy artillery and Grad rockets, openly slowing the demilitarization zone agreed by Turkey and Russia. Apparently, it's just not been established in the area. It's not a fact on the ground. The situation is also tense in northern Latakia and western Aleppo, but the daily intensity strikes there are lower. Meanwhile, Iran has struck new economic deals with Syria, and apparently, Iran is, after helping President Assad reclaim most of his country, they've reached these agreements on banking cooperation with Syria, and apparently Iran and Syria have signed 11 agreements, including a long-term strategic economic cooperation deal in a sign of changing wings in the Middle East, which are shaping up to new realities. And of course, this is not going to make the United States happy, because part of the war process, if you will, is the U.S. goes on in and they'll blow up a country, and then they'll go on in and offer to loan that country the money to rebuild, and then send in U.S. corporations to do the rebuilding for that money. And that's where a lot of the profit comes from. But now Iran is coming on in. They're going to be paying for the reconstruction. So Iran is going to get the financial benefit from all of that. So I can imagine the United States is very upset about that. President Assad has come on out following the signing of those agreements with Iran, saying that Iran and Syria must step up their joint efforts in the face of Western economic war. And in a meeting with Iran's first Vice President Ishaq Jahangiri in Damascus, Assad said Iran and Syria should make more joint efforts to thwart the plots of Western countries which are aimed at weakening the two countries, hindering their independent decision-making, and breaking the will of their people. Okay. Meanwhile, over in Iran, Iran's top security official says the country faces no scientific restrictions for increasing the range of its missiles, but that it currently has no plans to do so. It is focusing all its efforts merely on improving the accuracy of its missile technology. Now, this is in response to screams that we're hearing from Israel that Iran is getting ready to attack Israel with long-range ballistic missiles. And so Shamkhani is basically coming on out and saying, no, in point of fact, we're not lengthening the range of the missiles, we're just making them more accurate. Which won't stop Israel from screaming, but, it's a start here. Okay. CIA Chief Haspel is out there now saying that Iran is increasing its capabilities after Trump pulled out of the JCPOA treaty, the P5+1 deal. And the CIA chief says Tehran is still in compliance with that P5+1 deal. The same that the IAEA is saying. Iran is still playing by all the rules. But CIA Director Gina Haspel said Iran is making some preparations that would increase their ability to take a step back from the landmark deal. Basically, they're in compliance, but we do see them debating among themselves because they haven't seen the economic benefits they hoped for from the deal. And that was the problem all along. The United States made a bunch of commitments in the P5+1. Iran kept all their commitments. The United States did not. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is out there warning the Europeans not to defy U.S. sanctions against Iran. Apparently, the Trump administration is getting very concerned about all the countries that are making alternative payment arrangements to bypass U.S. sanctions with Iran in order to do business. And so now he's out there wagging his finger at the Europeans and saying, don't you dare defy the U.S. sanctions or we'll sanction you. And, you know, the EU nations did not withdraw from the P5+1 deal, and their companies are still technically allowed to trade with Iran. But unfortunately, the threat of U.S. sanctions are scaring most of these companies away. So the EU is basically looking for a way that they can engage in trade with Iran, which they're allowed to do because they're still part of the P5+1. And they don't see the U.S. sanctions as binding on them. Alrighty here. Over in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is decided to expel an international observer group tasked with safeguarding Palestinians in Hebron, claiming the mission is working against Israel because apparently this observer group is observing what Israel is doing to the Palestinians and reporting it to the world, and Netanyahu says that's a bad thing. So Netanyahu, who announced in a statement on Monday the mandate of the temporary international presence in Hebron would not be extended, saying, "We will not allow the continuation of an international force that acts against us." Now, the Palestinians are saying that Israel is basically trying to remove witnesses by ejecting the Hebron monitors, which is absolutely correct. Israel doesn't want witnesses to what they've been doing lately to the Palestinians. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here. And we were talking about how Netanyahu has basically kicked out this international observer group from Hebron. The Palestinians are now appealing to the United Nations to deploy an observer force in the West Bank and in Gaza to guarantee the safety and protection of the people of Palestine until the end of Israel's belligerent occupation. So things are getting very, very tense over it. Well, they've been tense for a very, very long time. Alrighty. Now, Nasrallah is basically sending a message saying to Israel, any more serious strikes could trigger a major war. That's certainly true about that one. It's just one of the many flashpoints around the world. Apparently, 15 Palestinians were injured in clashes with Israeli soldiers in northern Gaza along the border. Now, the U.S., a little bit of good news. We've been talking about this for a while. There were rumors that were kind of floating through the ether, if you will, where there were negotiations between the United States and the Taliban, and apparently they're close to finalizing a deal to end the 17-year-long Afghan conflict. Taliban officials said U.S. negotiators on Saturday agreed to a draft peace deal stipulating the withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan within 18 months of the agreement being signed. And the details were provided to Reuters by Taliban sources at the end of 6 days of talks with U.S. Special Peace Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad in Qatar, aimed at ending the United States' longest war. Now, this has yet to be confirmed by U.S. officials, nor has either side released an official statement, but this is looking really, really good. It's time for us to get out of Afghanistan. Of course, you know, the oil companies are still going to want access to that oil and gas pipeline at below market rates, and American pharmaceutical corporations and drug lords are still going to want access to the opium. So I don't know how they're going to resolve that issue. Okay. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell plans to introduce legislation to prevent a precipitous withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria and Afghanistan before terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS are defeated there. And he's planning to introduce this amendment to a wide-ranging Senate bill on the Middle East, saying it would recognize the danger of a precipitous withdrawal from either conflict and highlight the need for diplomatic engagement and political solutions to the underlying conflicts in Syria and Afghanistan. Well, it sounds to me like he's a little late out the gate regarding Afghanistan. But as far as Syria, again, this is Congress trying to insert itself into foreign policy, which rightfully belongs to the executive branch. And in any event, the president has to sign this bill for it to have any effect whatsoever. All right, we got to take a break for station identification. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Over in China, they have just test-fired their latest Dongfeng 26 missile, which is nicknamed the Guam Killer. It has a range of 3,500 miles. Now, China is not making specific threats against Guam, but obviously Guam, if we get into a war with China, Guam will be a target because there are several U.S. military bases there. So things are getting intense over there. Meanwhile, head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, is out there saying that China is the most concerning counterintelligence threat against the United States. And he's out there saying, as I look at the landscape today and over the course of my career, the Chinese counterintelligence threat is more deep, more diverse, more vexing, more challenging, more comprehensive, and more concerning than any counterintelligence threat I can think of. And basically, the FBI has released a report saying China presents a persistent cyber espionage threat and a growing attack threat to our core military and critical infrastructure systems. Alrighty, another little story here. This one's coming out of Zero Hedge, and it's talking about Afghanistan, about how we've been there for going on 18 years. It's a miserable, stalemated conflict. It's America's longest and most shameful war. It's cost over $1 trillion and who knows how many lives. And the conflict began in 2001 based on the lie that somehow Afghanistan was responsible for the 9/11 attacks. And of course, that story has just changed ever since. Oh, it was Afghanistan. No, it was Iraq. Now it's Iran. Now it's Monaco. And basically went on in there. But the real reason for the war in Afghanistan was that oil pipeline right of way. Because back in the mid-1990s, a group of oil companies sent representatives to Congress, a consortium, if you will, and said, we want this oil pipeline through Afghanistan. They want to charge us too much money for it. So the low-cost option is to change the government, and that is precisely what happened. Remember Hamid Karzai, the first president of the new Afghanistan? He was the UNICAL representative to Congress, arguing for that regime change and that pipeline right-of-way. Okay, once again, the United States has been caught helping ISIS commanders escape from prison in Afghanistan. And apparently a large number of prisoners, all of them senior members of ISIS, broke out of a Taliban prison in northwest Afghanistan after U.S. troops helped them escape through a covert operation. According to Tasnim dispatches, American forces operating in Afghanistan carried out a secret military operation on the northwestern province of Badghis 2 weeks ago and helped the ISIS inmates escape the prison. And apparently they were picked up by helicopters and transferred to someplace safe. Just in case you weren't really sure who ISIS was actually working for. Over in France, the Yellow Vests are calling for a general strike on February 5th. They want everybody to basically just sit down, don't work, don't buy anything. And apparently this is being called by the spokesman for the Yellow Vests, Francois Bolo. He's 32 years old, and he's basically calling on the French people to form a general strike on February 5th as the only way to force a deaf president to call us to the polls. And Bolo is saying, I defend people threatened with the seizure of their homes by the banks, and he's complaining about the tax devices of the Macron government working for the benefit of the richest 1% at the expense of the public services. So the Yellow Vests are still going strong over there. Interestingly enough, the situation up in Ukraine may be about to change. Apparently yesterday, Ukraine's President Poroshenko said that Ukraine needs peace with Russia. He says, of course we need peace with Russia. It could be a cold peace, but peace. People are tired of the war, and Russian propaganda is playing with this painful emotion. He said, war and peace will be one of the main issues in the elections because the population will elect not only the president, but the supreme commander. Poroshenko also emphasized that Kiev will continue to seek a solution to the conflict in the Donbass region by political and diplomatic means. So it looks like Poroshenko has blinked, and they're backing off this idea of going to war with Russia. Alrighty, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, as you're already aware, the United States, basically Donald Trump, pulled out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and already the U.S. is starting to manufacture low-yield nuclear warheads for the Trident missiles. And a lot of people are very concerned because they're saying these low-yield warheads could lower the threshold for a nuclear conflict. You know, people are very hesitant to use the really big bombs, but if they figure it's just a little one, yeah, we can go ahead and use it. Anyway. So they're getting ready to deliver these. Apparently, the new weapon is called the W-76-2. It's a modification of the existing Trident MIRV reentry vehicle. And basically, the Union of Concerned Scientists said its yield had most likely been cut by taking away one stage from the original two-stage W-76 thermonuclear device. So basically, it's the uranium core, the plutonium core, and they have simply left out the deuterium casing that would go for the fusion burn. So it's a baby nuke here. All right, over in Great Britain, there is a spotlight that's being put on the Integrity Initiative. The scandal is getting worse and worse. The corporate media is ignoring it, especially the British media. And apparently new leaks have revealed more embarrassing tidbits confirming the shady nature of this group. And apparently the spotlight is on the Integrity Initiative's targeting of anti-fracking activists, its ties to the HSBC Bank, its obsessive focus on nuclear war with Russia, and its plans to foster a long-term appreciation of NATO among Muslim youth. Good luck on that one. And in another blow to the image of itself as an unbiased exposer of fake news, which the Integrity Initiative had worked hard to cultivate, one of the documents details its support for and close relationship with Britain's specialist group Military Intelligence, the SGMI, which was masterminded by Chris Donnelly, a key player at the Integrity Initiative's parent organization, the London-based Institute for statecraft. So it's basically a propaganda outfit is what it was. And they just decided to call themselves Integrity Initiative here. Now, a lot of people are still talking about the indictment of Roger Stone, and he's pleading not guilty on all charges, but it's important to look at the indictments and realize there's nothing in there about a Trump-Russia conspiracy. It's just not there. And in a way, I think Mueller has actually damaged himself indicting Roger Stone because it simply underscores the fact there was no there. There was no Russian collusion. So basically, Mueller's office, the Department of Justice, and the FBI have known for months there was no such conspiracy, and still they're pushing that narrative. Trump may have been in cahoots with Putin. He may have been doing, he might have done this. There's no there. There's no proof. They absolutely failed. And a lot of people are still talking about the manner in which Roger Stone was arrested, where the FBI showed up, SWAT team style, night vision goggles, bulletproof Kevlar, assault weapons, before dawn, banged on his door, took him away in handcuffs and chains to be filmed by CNN by a reporter who turns out to have his own past connections with the FBI. And a lot of people are saying, why did you need to do that? Stone knew he was going to be indicted. If he'd wanted to flee, he would have done so before then. His lawyer said if he'd called up, he would have just come on down and surrendered. This was all theater. This was absolute theater. So anyway, now Tulsi Gabbard here in Hawaii, she's getting ready to officially announce her 2020 presidential campaign. It's going to be on Saturday. I still haven't gotten the location or the time where that's going to happen. But apparently her campaign is already in trouble. And apparently Tulsi is being called out for past anti-gay remarks. And she said she's since evolved, but she's already being attacked for that. Okay. So we'll see. Anyway, apparently Democrats are floating the idea of finding a primary challenger for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And apparently she has infuriated her colleagues by aligning with a progressive outside group that's threatening to primary entrenched Democrats. And now some of these lawmakers are turning the tables on her and are discussing recruiting a primary challenger to run against her. You know, she's a big hit on social media. I don't know why. I think she's the Democrats' equivalent of Sarah Palin. They want to find somebody to run against her. Make her a one-term congressperson. Anyway. Okay, now apparently Palestinian and Muslim American rights campaigners have decried a proposed U.S. House of Representatives resolution accusing Muslim congresswomen of anti-Semitism due to their criticism of Israeli policies, saying the measures amount to anti-Muslim bigotry. And this, of course, is Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. And again, this is part of that idea that criticism of Israel is somehow anti-Semitic. And it isn't. That's like saying that the only reason people bitch about the Nazis is they hate the German people. But Israel's out there just trying to get that idea across. And it's a trick. Some years ago, over on Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman had a former member of the Knesset that came on and basically admitted, yeah, we scream anti-Semitism when we want people to stop talking. When they ask a question we can't answer. It's just a trick. We use it all the time. All righty. This is going to be, if you thought 2016 was bad, 2020 is going to be a lot worse. And we're already seeing smears against Bernie Sanders, that he's a Kremlin agent. He's working for Russia. And Bernie's expected to announce his 2020 candidacy in the near future as well. And that's what it's going to be. Anybody who's not part of the progressive movement, oh, you're a Kremlin agent. You're a Russian asset. You're working for Vladimir Putin. All righty. Getting on back to Venezuela. As you know, there is a big stink over the fact that Great Britain, the Bank of England rather, is refusing to return something like $1.2 billion worth of Venezuela's gold. Now, the gold was in transit going from Germany to Venezuela. The Bank of England has it in their vaults. They are refusing to let it go, saying it's going to be used for money laundering or political corruption, and who knows. It really isn't up to them. And there's an article that came out of Russia today basically saying that by doing this, Britain is destroying its own credibility as a financial center. Because if you're holding somebody's money and you refuse to turn it over on demand, that is a big problem. And not just for Venezuela. Other countries, other customers are going to say, no, I don't trust the bank to hold my money. So Professor Richard Wolff is out there saying that Britain and the Bank of England are clearly under the thumb of the United States. And he says that's a signal to every country that has or may have difficulties with the U.S. They'd better get their money out of England and out of London because it's no longer a safe place. And he's absolutely right about that. By the way, I've noticed on the History Channel they're rerunning America's Book of Secrets again. And so you might want to keep an eye out for that gold conspiracy episode because we just lay it all out. How all these bankers are just playing fast and loose with other people's gold here. Okay, iPhone sales have plunged 15%. Consumer confidence has fallen for the third straight month. And, a lot of people are saying, well, we've always believed, Apple was always going to make money. These tech giants were always going to make money. Well, no. Not anymore. I mean, Apple released their most recent quarterly reports on Tuesday, and the numbers were not good. And Apple's CEO is saying that, yeah, they think the price on the new iPhone X is a factor. People just don't have the money to buy that expensive phone. And this is the reason for the attacks on Huawei. Because Huawei makes decent phones. They're not great, they're not iPhones, but they make decent phones at a good price. And right now, your average cell phone customer, that's what they're looking for. They need a good price. They need an inexpensive cell phone that they could just use. All they're going to do is make calls on it, send text messages on it. They don't need all the bells and whistles. They don't need the facial reading or the cutesy little emoticons made out of their own face. They just want a basic phone. And that's why this huge thing about Huawei and 5G is going on. It's all about market share. That, Huawei is basically taking a huge share of the American market here. Meanwhile, Huawei is asking their suppliers to move the production out of the United States. And apparently there's been this indictment against Huawei and its CFO, Meng Wanzhou, unveiled by Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, has elevated the feud between the U.S. and the world's largest telecoms equipment provider and the second largest maker of smartphones to absurd new heights. Now, officials from Huawei and Beijing have denounced the charges as anti-competitive and politically motivated, and Huawei is apparently bracing for the other shoe to drop. So according to a report by Nikkei, the tech giant has asked suppliers to consider moving some of their production outside the United States in case the Congress or the Department of Justice adopt a ban on American-made parts being sold to the chip maker. With the memory of the near demise of ZTE still fresh in its memory, the company has made a request based on the expectation that an order for a full-scale ban or other critical equipment by President Trump is imminent, and it very well could be. Okay, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here and talking about immigration and the refugee crisis here. Supposedly, Trump's representatives are starting to negotiate with the Democrats about the border wall, which they have to come to an agreement, before the 15th of next month, or the government will shut down again, or something else is going to happen. But apparently, there's not going to be a deal. The Democrats are refusing to compromise. They are still standing firm. No wall, no wall, no wall. We'll give you money for uniforms and TV cameras and all this other stuff. No wall. They're absolutely ruling out the idea of a wall. And, Trump ended the shutdown saying he needed a compromise from the Democrats. He's not getting it. The Democrats are absolutely standing firm. Nancy Pelosi is out there declaring victory. I beat Donald Trump. I whipped that president, for fair, and just celebrating. And they're just determined. They want to flood this country with illegal immigrant voters so they can win the election in 2020. And so a lot of people are saying, will Trump declare a national emergency? Now, apparently, during a House Armed Service Committee hearing on Tuesday, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy John Rood confirmed to Representative Mo Brooks Trump does not need a Congress or a national emergency to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, that he can basically do it using Defense Department funds. And I'm sure they've got lots of money over there, and they're very good at building walls, and this is a national security crisis. So Trump has got that option as well. But he's still having to deal with the reality of a political fight. The Democrats are going to declare victory. We refuse to give him, even if Trump builds the wall, they're going to campaign in 2020 saying, we refuse to give him his wall. All righty. Now, apparently, the federal government is going to offer $114 million in new money for asylum seeker housing. This is up in Canada. And the federal Liberals plan to spend this $114 million to help pay for temporary housing for asylum seekers, some Ontario's government criticized as being hundreds of millions short of what is needed. Well, I got an idea. Send them back home. And especially with this winter, they're not going to enjoy the cold very much. They might decide to go home themselves. That actually happened last winter with a lot of the people who'd snuck across the border and they'd come to the United States or Europe to be refugees, and they got a taste of that winter weather, and they said, oh, to heck with this. And they went on back to home. So they're dealing with all of this stuff. Of course, Al Gore is out there saying that the flood of refugees to our borders is proof of global warming. It's proof that where they live has just gotten too hot to live and they have to come up here. Meanwhile, of course, we've got record-setting cold. We'll get into that in hour number 3 here. The Pentagon is sending several thousand more troops to the southwestern border, fulfilling a request made by the Department of Homeland Security. Currently, there are 2,300 troops stationed at the southwestern border, and the Pentagon is going to deploy an additional 2,000 troops as part of the Department of Homeland Security request for the military to extend its mission there. Originally intended to last until December 15th, the military's mission will now be extended all the way to September 30th, and they're going to need it. All right, let's grab some phone calls here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. There's a couple things I wanted to talk about, but you were talking about them vilifying Ocasio-Cortez, the Democrats, and Bernie Sanders. And I wanted to point out Bernie Sanders has come out with a moderate hangout against Israel. For one thing, he's come out and said he's for, against what they're doing in Gaza and some things like that. And that's one reason why they don't want him in. The other reason, Mike, I think, is that because since he was so thoroughly handled and cheated before by what's her name, Wasserman Schultz and Hillary Clinton and basically the intelligence agencies when they infiltrated his campaign, that he's wise to all that stuff, and they can't have him in because he knows how to handle it now. But that's my one observation on that. I wanted also, I don't know if you've talked about Senate Bill 1 passing yesterday, or advancing anyway.
Well, we talked about it when it was first being proposed, but yeah, it's just a giveaway to Israel and, an attack on freedom of speech.
Well, it advanced yesterday in the Senate. So it's wherever it was, it's now apparently got enough support that it's moving forward. So despite all my phone calls and the fact that it's violating every one of these senators' oath of office, it's advancing. But one more thing to talk about Venezuela.
Okay, well, I got to put you on hold here. Don't hang up. I'm going to come back to you right after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, you said you had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, you were talking about the comparison of Vietnam and Venezuela, and there are some, but I'll tell you the way that the guys in the Joint Chiefs will argue this, Mike, just like the way they argued in Korea. Like that we can be in Korea, for instance. Korea would be because it's the only place in Asia with a peninsula surrounded on three sides by water. Our naval could play into that, close to a friendly Japan for logistics, and a narrow neck that even you could throw up 10 divisions, which we could do, and it could, like the Spartans at Thermopylae, they could conceivably hold. Well, and they would argue, and they will argue this, because the people against it will say just what you're saying, that it's like Vietnam, and I frankly, whether it is or it isn't, we shouldn't be in there at all, right? But they'll say, well, look, we got Colombia, which is a narco economy, which we control. All those guys are narco guys, are in bed with the DEA and everything else. On the northern edge, they've got the Caribbean, which we can control. On the southern, they've got Brazil, which has that new basically fascist Bolsonaro, or whatever his name is, that's basically in our pocket as well, with no superpower like it was in Vietnam, or at least major power China, bordering it. And so, and of course, it's an economy that's as poor as Haiti now.
Yes.
So, believe it or not. So they might say, well, it's militarily handleable. Well, with an active army of ours, of 500,000 people, and us everywhere else in the world, it really isn't handleable. But that's what they'll say. So I know you've got a good head for this, and those are the arguments that they'll make, Mike.
Well, I'm sure, yeah, they'll make the arguments there and, ask for more money and more people. At some point, they're going to have to initiate a draft, and that is when I think the American people are really going to snap out of their torpor, if you will, and say, this has gone on enough.
Yeah, I agree, and that would put us on the cusp. If we don't get out of Afghanistan, if we have to stay, if we're staying in Korea, if we're still bogged down in Iraq and the Middle East and Syria in some way, then a draft, that's a real, they'll do everything they can to avoid that. That would be their
I understand. I'm sure that they understand the public reaction to a draft will be a very, very negative one, but they got to be running out of people. I mean, the military are not meeting their quotas for sign-ups. And, if they're getting ready to go into Venezuela, they're going to need a lot more people. Maybe they're going to basically take the people who are currently in Afghanistan, but that's only 2,000 people and move them over. But supposedly the pullout from Afghanistan, even if they sign this deal, it's not for another 18 months.
You know, Mike, if I can just kind of a semi-related topic, but you know, I watched a lot of the History Channel and, you know, the American Heroes Channel, the Military History Channel, and there's advertisements for the Wounded Warrior Society and other ones like that, where they're having veterans, you know, that are, you know, the wastage of this war, this horribly disfigured and so on, and support these guys that without them, you know, and they'll testify without Wounded Warrior and people like them that they would really be in a bad spot. And I believe them and I applaud what they're doing and all. But I keep thinking to myself, what a freaking failure it is that we ask these guys, why isn't the government taking care of these people?
I agree.
Why do we have to have private charities? And it drives me nuts when people say that, and I go, yeah, I laud that, but what does that say about how the government's abandoning these guys? They let them get ruined, and then they just wash their hands of them. And you can barely get into the VA. We all know the problems with the VA. So,
yeah, our government is treating the illegal immigrants better than they treat our homeless veterans.
Yeah, not even homeless veterans. All veterans. These wounded, disfigured guys.
Yes.
And it's terrible. And I like to point that out to everybody that I see. Why are these guys having to pick up the standard for what the government should already be doing? So that's my little soapbox thing. I just wanted to say.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The government will get these men and women into the military. They'll use them up, throw them back on out, and just abandon them. And you're absolutely right about the VA. People can't get in there, or they have to wait a very, very long time to get in there. They're not being taken good care of. The attitude of the government is, if we just wait long enough, they'll just die and they'll stop being a problem for us. And that's just how callous it does seem to be. And whether you agree with the wars or not, and I certainly do not, we as a nation, we do owe something to all of those people who put that uniform on and they take the oath and they obey the orders and they do what they're told to do. Even if we don't like what it is they're doing, we still owe them. And especially if they come back from the war zone, severely damaged, they've got to be taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And if I can say one more thing, there's a documentary out now, a historical documentary called "They Shall Never Grow Old," I believe it's called.
Okay.
And it's on World War I, and it was done by the director of Lord of the Rings. And Mike, it's
Peter
the best
Jackson.
Historical documentary. Yes, if you have a chance, it's out this weekend. It's limited, because it's a documentary in theaters. But oh my God, it's a masterpiece, Mike. And what they have it in 3D, and they've colorized it brilliantly, and they've even gotten lip readers on these old, beautifully colorized and 3D'd, pictures, original pictures and films. They've got lip readers and they'll have, if it's some Welsh regiment talking and they're photographing, they're lip readers, and they'll have a Welsh guy, in the background saying what that guy is saying.
Yeah. And
they also have tests. It's brilliant, and I highly recommend that to anybody out there.
What was the name again?
So, They Shall Not Grow Old, I believe it's called.
Yeah, I would definitely want to see that one because my grandfather was a World War I veteran. I still have his helmet and his gas mask supplied by the lowest bidder. It didn't work. He lost a lung to German mustard gas. And, I would definitely want to see that.
And a parting thing, I just want to point out also that on the last day of World War I, which only went till 11 a.m., right?
Yes.
They were so eager the generals to play with this military toy that Congress and the nation had given them, that there were more casualties, American casualties, on the last half day of World War I, and they knew it was going to end at 11 o'clock, than there were on D-Day.
Yes.
There were more deaths than on D-Day. All they had to do was sit in their holes and get out, and all those guys would have been alive.
Yep.
So, whatever. Goes to show what our leadership has been like for a long time.
Yeah, I still remember the story about the Christmas truce for World War I, and I don't know what happened on the German side, but they basically crucified the officers on the Allied side for letting it happen.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's we've been that way for over 100 years. So, but Mike, thanks a lot. I got to roll here. Thanks so much for letting me on.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Peter. We're going to switch over to Miles in Maine. Aloha, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Thanks for another wonderful show and all your laborious work with what really happened. And I just wanted to get your take. I had a thought here. If we can't get this wall through and the Democrats are going to stonewall and play all kinds of tricks and games on President Trump, why don't he just take his authority and just tomorrow say, we can't come to an agreement. We're putting the military, we're dispatching them to the southern border immediately.
Well, I think he should. I mean, first of all, I think he shouldn't have caved on the wall. He played basically right into Pelosi's hands. They're going to be campaigning on this in 2020. And Trump once again showed himself to be a very weak leader. And I certainly hope we're going to get something by the 15th of February. But at this point, I don't know. Trump just doesn't seem to have the force of will to get what he wants to get done.
Well, precisely, and that's exactly what I see. And I think that's the only thing that can save him now, because he's gone all around the block with this crazy nonsense with these Democrats letting him lead the way, carrot and the stick approach, whatever. I mean, they don't even offer the carrot, but I think now he just says, look, and he makes an issue of it. The Democrats have given us an impassable bypass. We need our military there. From this point on, the military will be dispatched until the Democrats can come with an earnest deal to solve this problem that's destroying the country.
Well, that's one way to do it. But again, apparently there's a way that Trump can build his wall without calling for a national emergency. And that's to have the military build it, get the Army Corps of Engineers down there. And they'll do a really good job, I'm sure. The Army Corps of Engineers has an excellent reputation for being able to build things, and just get the thing built once and for all, and tell the Democrats, I'm sorry, you can only have legal voters in 2020.
I think that's true, but if you make the crisis, what Rahm Emanuel said, you create the crisis and put it on the Democrats. Look, you made me send the military, and I think it may preserve them for the next election, hopefully.
Well, maybe. I get a sense that Trump really isn't thinking all that much about the next election, because he keeps walking into all these big bear traps that Pelosi and Schumer are setting for him. And I don't know where he's getting his political advice, but if he's serious about running in 2020, he needs to start thinking about that now and how every decision that he makes right now is going to affect that. Personally, I think he's a one-term president at this point. I don't think he's recoverable. Yeah. I don't think he's redeemable.
Yeah, and you're exactly, I agree with you 100%. He's very annoying with that. I mean, his entire situation has been based on, indecisiveness, and he needs to be firm and have a complete plan that's totally acceptable for the American people, and he hasn't and it's clear they want the border, they want it secured, and he has not been able to come up with that. So, I agree with you and hope there's a solution. And I want to thank you for your show. Have a great day, and everybody don't forget to contribute to RBN, or we never get this kind of news. We won't get Michael. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, basically pointing to the Daily Callers video, Walls Across America. and, you know, pointing out the hypocrisy of all these people who've got walls around their homes, but they're out there saying, oh, Trump's wall on the southern border, that's bad, we can't have that. This is all about flooding this country with illegal immigrants who are going to vote Democratic in 2020. That's really what it's all about. It's not good for our economy. It's a health problem. It's a health crisis. And it really does need to stop. And again, I don't have a problem with anybody who wants to be a legal immigrant to this country. You come in through the process, welcome. I hope it's not disappointing for you here. But the illegal immigrant problem is a crisis. It's a national emergency. And I'm sick and tired of all the emails I get saying you're just being racist because illegal is not a race. All right. Piers Morgan is out there saying that Pelosi played Trump for a chump. It's time to do a deal on the wall that can make you a champion, or you can kiss goodbye to getting reelected in 2020. I'm absolutely in agreement. At this point, I think a lot of people who supported Donald Trump in 2020 are very disappointed in him. He basically bailed on vaccine safety. He's bailed on election integrity. Hillary Clinton is still not in jail. Trump didn't stand up for the independent media against all this online censorship. And the independent media was critical to Trump's success in 2016. And either he's forgotten it or he just doesn't care. But we're not going to be there for him in 2020, especially with Facebook and Google and everything filtering everything that we're saying, because they're filtering all the conservative voices. We won't be able to get out there here. Okay, now over in Italy, Salvini, standing up to Merkel and the open borders people, they've reduced migrant entry in Italy by 95%. 95%. See, it can be done. It can be done. You can secure your borders. You can control who gets to come into your country and who does not. Story coming out of The Guardian. 30 writers, historians, and Nobel laureates basically have come out with this manifesto saying that the European Union is coming apart before our eyes. And liberal values in Europe are facing a challenge not seen since the 1930s. As the Great Britain lurches toward Brexit, and nationalists look set to make sweeping gains in the EU parliamentary elections. And they're saying Europe is perishing beneath the waves of populism. They're saying it like it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing here. All righty. Speaking of Brexit, apparently Tusk and Macron have shot down Theresa May's plan to go back to Brussels with a mandate to reopen talks. And she wants to renegotiate the Brexit deal, saying the deal on the table is already the best available. But Brussels is basically saying no. Macron is saying the deal is not negotiable. So it looks like Theresa May's hit a wall there. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And somebody just sent me a link to the trailer for They Shall Not Grow Old. I was looking at it over the commercial break. It is an absolutely fabulous job that they've done. And hats off to Peter Jackson for having put this all together. So you may want to look at the trailer, and definitely when it becomes available around here, I definitely want to see this. I definitely want to see this. My goodness. All right, getting on back to current events here. Out in California, their new governor is out there calling for a tax on drinking water. Just when you thought government could not get more grabby than it already has, Governor Gavin Newsom's first budget proposal suggests instituting a tax on drinking water in the name of cleaning up California's water systems. And the Environmental Protection section of the 2019-2020 budget seeks to establish a new special fund with a dedicated funding source from new water fertilizer and dairy fees to enable the State Water Resources Control Board to assist communities, particularly disadvantaged communities, in paying for the short-term and long-term costs of obtaining access to safe and affordable drinking water. I wonder if that'll apply to Hinckley, California, because they sure know it. They sure need it up there. And I think a lot of people probably can be forgiven for wondering, well, what about all the taxes we've already paid that are supposed to go for things like, water and roads and bridges? Seems like every time there's a new incoming politician, they want more taxes on stuff. Where's the money going? Well, I know in California, a lot of it's going for the illegal immigrants. Huge, huge cost for the illegal immigrant. Now, last we were talking about how New York just passed this horrible, horrible law authorizing abortion right up to the moment of birth. And Cuomo signed it, and he ordered all these buildings to be lit up in pink light to celebrate. Huzzah, huzzah. Wants to end the death penalty in New York, but not for unborn babies here. Apparently, they're getting ready to do exactly the same thing down in Virginia. Virginia House Democrats are proposing legislation that would allow abortions to be performed right up until a moment a woman is giving birth. It's called the Repeal Act. HB 2491 would eliminate all existing restrictions on abortion in the state of Virginia, allowing third trimester abortions to be performed if a doctor judges that the baby is a threat to the mental and physical health of the woman in a substantial and irremediable way. So, yeah, Virginia's a bad state to be a newborn baby in. One of the things I don't like about the New York law is it allows non-medical practitioners to carry out abortions. That's going to blow back in their face. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. So feel free to call on in. Let us know what you're thinking here today. Apparently, there is a lawsuit alleging that Bayer AG's glyphosate-based Roundup weed killer is causing cancer. Of course, there's already been that one decision in California, huge settlement. The judge rolled it on back. But the lawsuits are really piling on up. Now, a federal judge who's overseeing these lawsuits basically has allowed pieces of controversial evidence that the company wanted to exclude from the upcoming trials. Now, of course, Bayer is denying allegations that glyphosate causes cancer and is saying decades of independent studies have shown the chemical to be safe for human use. Now, one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, the judge, said that plaintiffs could introduce evidence that Monsanto had attempted to ghostwrite the studies and influence the findings of scientists and regulators during the first phase of the trials on glyphosate. And he said the documents showed the company taking a position on the science or study is relevant. Now, we've talked before about the fact that science can be bought. We saw that with the global warming scam. And we had a story not too long ago talking about how there are companies that do nothing but write phony scientific papers to push a particular product or attack a competitor's product, and then they'll find some scientist who, in exchange for a grant, will publish the paper under their name. And the result is that a lot of the articles that are in these peer-reviewed journals turn out to be irreproducible. And they have to be basically recalled or retracted. But unfortunately, once they're in that paper journal, it's not like somebody's going around with scissors and cutting the articles out. They're still there. And companies can take the journal and say, see, there's this article here in this journal that says our product is really, really good and perfectly safe. And it's a big money business, and it's polluting science from top to bottom. So I'm glad the judge went along with this, because I think, evidence that Monsanto was trying to ghostwrite the favorable scientific articles, I think that is relevant to the proceeding. I think it's very, very relevant. All right, story out of Global Research up in Canada. They do a lot of really good work. Apparently, there's been a study by a Toronto-based consulting and research company that basically looked at the past 50 years of mainstream reporting on Israel and says there is no question it's been distorted to portray the Jewish state in positive terms while ignoring the plight of the Palestinians under Israeli occupation. Now, this study was based on a computer analysis of 50 years of data and found that major U.S. newspapers have provided consistently skewed pro-Israel reporting on Israel-Palestine. The slanting in news coverage included subtle manipulations, like using word associations favorable to Israel and derogatory to Palestinians, as well as persistent publication of stories praising Israel, while also avoiding reporting anything supportive of the dispossessed Arab points of view. Gee, imagine my shock. The corporate media has been lying to us yet again. And of course, it's what they do. Alrighty. Getting on in here. Down in Georgia, there is a gentleman who is being praised as a hero after he shot dead a robber who was holding his handgun to the face of a cashier at a dollar store. Apparently, this took place yesterday morning in DeKalb County, about 20 miles from Atlanta. And at least 3 customers were in the store when the crook pulled his gun on 2 employees and demanded they empty the cash register. So, good for this Georgia man who did that. That's how you take care of business here. Meanwhile, up in Washington State, as you know, they have passed some seriously draconian gun laws. And it's meeting a lot of resistance. Washington State. When we lived there, when Claire and I lived there, the gun laws were very relaxed. It was very loose. Now they've got some of the strictest gun laws in the country. And the sheriffs, the state sheriffs, are saying that they refuse to enforce these new gun laws because they are unconstitutional. Now, the sheriffs are the last line of defense between authoritarianism and freedom, and they're in a unique position. As elected officials, basically nobody has authority over them. Not the judges, not the feds, no one except the people who may or may not choose to re-elect them. So what are these new gun laws in Washington? Well, apparently last November, Washington voters passed a ballot initiative, I-1639. And it says to purchase a semi-automatic rifle, buyers must be over 21, undergo an enhanced background check, must have completed a safety course. I don't have a problem with that one, by the way. I think everybody should go through a gun safety course if they're going to have a gun. And there's a waiting period, 9 days to take possession of their weapon. And apparently a gun owner who doesn't store his or her weapon properly can be prosecuted. So I'm not exactly sure what they mean by properly, whether it's you have to have a gun cabinet or a gun safe or something like that. Anyway, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Over in New York State, they've passed yet another anti-gun bill. It's called the SAFE Act 2.0. It is highly restrictive. And apparently it is so restrictive, it is forbidding people from defending themselves from criminal elements. And so basically outside of an armed resource officer or police officer, there's no way to meet a threat from an armed gunman with equal force. Now, apparently this is impacting a lot of the schools who are thinking about having some kind of an armed respondent there in this age of school shootings. But while these schools remain unarmed, they remain the best targets for those looking to do harm or stage a false flag for the gun grabbers. Suppressing the law-abiding, trained, and good people of this world will do nothing to stop the bad. And don't forget, not too long ago, the Department of Justice came on out and said gun laws don't work because the criminals are getting their guns illegally. So all these gun laws are doing are disarming the law-abiding citizen, the good guys. And that means the bad guys basically it's open season. The bad guys can rob and burglarize and rape and kill, and nobody's going to be there to stop them. The average wait time for a 911 call right now is about 18 minutes across the country. The bad guys aren't going to wait that long. They're going to come on in, do what they're going to do, and they're going to skedaddle. So clearly, the government is not thinking in terms of the safety of the American people. They're just concerned about the fact that the American people might be getting a little angry, which, of course, was the main reason for the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. It's not about target shooting. Those were given in colonial time. That was considered automatic. There was no need to talk about those. But when they talk about the security of a free state and they talk about a militia, those are military terms. The Second Amendment is about making sure that the people, you, I, Claire, have access to military-capable weapons with which to deter aggression by the government. That's what it's really all about. And that's what the government is trying to take away from you. All right. Over on YouTube, there's a new scam going on, and it's an abuse of YouTube's copyright system. Apparently, scammers are using the platform's three-strike system for extortion. They'll file 2 false claims against a YouTuber and then contact him demanding cash to avoid the third, which would terminate his channel. So you want to be on the lookout for that. All right, let's talk about human-caused global warming here. It is cold. There is no question about it. It is cold. Record-setting low temperatures all across the Midwest here. Over in Chicago, they have literally had to set the train tracks on fire to keep the trains operating. Temperatures are way below zero. The tracks are contracting, and in order to keep the trains running, they've literally they're setting fire to the tracks to keep them warm enough for the trains to operate. Remember when the post office used to say, you know, neither rain nor snow nor gloom of night will stay these couriers? Well, no longer. Apparently, it is so cold over there in Chicago, the U.S. Postal Service has suspended mail delivery to a large part of the area. More than 1,500 flights have been canceled from Chicago's airports. And residents are huddling inside. And they're out there saying, it's that polar vortex. It's that polar vortex. Oh, gosh darn, that polar vortex. It proves the world is warming. Yeah. The corporate media is out there still pushing that. This is proof the world is warming. Oh, absolutely. It's proof the world is warming here. Apparently, Chicago hit minus 75 degrees on the wind chill. It's really, really bad. And local governments are issuing warnings to people. Take this very seriously. Stay indoors. Stay warm. Don't think you can walk outside briefly, without adequate protection. You can get frostbite in just mere minutes from how cold this all is out there. So, Winter Storm Jaden is underway. It's marching across the Midwest. It's heading toward the south and east. The storm is already responsible for 3 deaths and well over 1,000 flights canceled. Government offices, schools, and businesses have announced closures in preparation for the storm. So it is very, very nasty out there. Right now, 6 states in the United States have recorded temperatures lower than the South Pole. Now, this is coming out of AccuWeather.com. It says records are being shattered. Communities are enduring the harshest cold in years as the polar vortex tightens its grip on the Midwestern United States. Apparently, temperatures plummeted 20 below zero Fahrenheit from North Dakota to northern Illinois just earlier this morning. And biting winds made the extreme cold more life-threatening. Temperatures dropped under 50 below zero. Frostbite can occur in mere minutes on exposed skin in these conditions. So do not take this lightly here. Apparently, one of the deaths was a man found frozen to death in a garage in Milwaukee. The cold has led to widespread school closures, major travel disruptions, and even the suspension of the mail service. Is it the beginning of the new ice age? I think so. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Art off the grid. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, it's interesting you brought up this whole topic about gun laws and such. We have a local talk show host here. I'm not going to give his name because I don't want to embarrass the guy. But just right about, he comes on at 3 o'clock local here. And I listen to him until you come on. And while I was listening to him, he comes out and he's talking about these new gun laws that they want to pass. And he comes out and literally, I'm not kidding you, Mike, he actually said he was willing to sacrifice his rights if it meant XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And so, of course, me, the kind of guy I am, called him up and challenged him on this. And what I told him, I said, basically what you've just told me is you don't have any rights. Because if you're willing to sacrifice your rights, you don't have any rights. And we have to refer back to the founders, specifically Benjamin Franklin, because you're talking, and I told him this, I said, you're talking about security and the ability to protect your family, and you don't want to have to all this waiting for this and that and the other when you need a gun now. I said, but you talk about sacrificing your rights. You don't have the rights. And I explained to him what the Second Amendment was about, the militia. Who is the militia? How the right to keep and bear arms cannot be infringed. You know, Mike, he couldn't handle when I brought the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because I specifically mentioned the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, specifically the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights. He hung up on me, Mike. He couldn't take it. This is what we have to do, folks. This is how we shut them down. We call them up every day. We challenge them live on air, and we have to be, as the Democrats like to say, relentless and unwavering.
I agree. I get very upset when anybody says, I'm willing to give up my rights for blah, 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 blah. Because that's always a slippery road, because you'll give up your rights and you usually don't get anything in exchange for it anyway. And, I refuse to surrender my right to freedom of speech, and I'm going to go on using it as much as possible.
Yep, absolutely. But this is how we do it, folks. We call them live on air. We challenge them live on air. Get out there, talk to everybody you know. Folks, we are down to the wire now. Look at everything that's happening and how quickly things are changing. We cannot let up. This is it. This is the defining moment here in the United States of America. And if we don't fight, we lose. And I'm here to tell you, folks, I will go to my grave before I lay down for these bastards.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. And I know a lot of people are getting angry right now. And it's very frustrating. As somebody who's my age here, remembering what this country used to be, it's been terrible to see how it's being destroyed, how it's being turned into something very ugly by this liberal globalist agenda. And again, though, I see that the likelihood of a Soviet Union-style collapse is probably taking down the federal government. That's the most likely thing that's going to happen, I think. I hope. It would be certainly best for the nation. It would be best for the world.
Yep, absolutely. And for those of you who want to sacrifice your rights, yeah, you do get something out of it. Thank you, Master. Can I have another one? That's what you get out of it. Thanks, Mike. And folks, don't give up. Don't give in. Fight back. I'd rather die on my feet than to live on my knees. Have a great one. We'll talk to you again later.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Jerry in Chicago. And Jerry, I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike, and thank you very much for taking my call. It's been a while since I called into your show. But you had mentioned something in the last 10 minutes about the Chicago weather, and I got to be honest with you. I had to work in Chicago today. It was minus 10 degrees, not including the wind chill. That was the coldest it got all day, all night.
Yeah, but it's that wind chill that really takes it down here. Anyway, Jerry, got to put you on hold. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Jerry in Chicago. And Jerry, you're very lucky to be where you are, where it's only 10 degrees below zero. Other areas are certainly reporting much lower temperatures than that. And, of course, the wind chill is the big problem.
You know, you're 100% right. And I slipped outside one of the doors of the building I was working in. It was a Chicago public school, and they closed them for today and tomorrow because of the wind chill and the cold factor. And yeah, I smoke, so I slip outside the door for a cigarette with just a work shirt, a T-shirt, and a long sleeve T-shirt underneath that. So I didn't wear a jacket or anything else like that. And yeah, you're right. It was cold, but if you stepped out into the sun, it wasn't too bad. I mean, you could stand out there for 5-10 minutes before you realize that, hey, I better get in because it's too cold. But that's not the reason I called. I heard a recording from yesterday. I don't know if it was before the first of the year, but you were talking to a caller that was talking about Waco, Texas, and the Branch Davidians.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, have you ever seen the video, the YouTube video of one of the ATF agents climbing up a ladder, and then when he got to the gutter and half of his body above it, he reached for his sidearm in a drop-down holster on his side leg, and he grabbed for his Glock, and I don't know if you know about Glocks, but they don't have a safety. The safety is the trigger, but
yes.
He pulled the trigger and shot himself in the leg.
Yeah, I did see that.
Okay, I haven't looked at that for a few years. I was just wondering if I was the only idiot that ever seen it. But hey, that's all. This is the type of people that the government is hiring to shell out the law, supposedly, which isn't law. Okay, the Branch Davidians didn't do anything to bother anybody. Either did the guy up at Ruby Ridge.
Yes, Randy Weaver.
Yes, or the Hammonds, or the Bundys, or anybody else. You know what? And the same thing is when I'm driving my car down the road and I get pulled over because I have a tail light out, and they need to write me a violation, and then they happen to notice I have a crack in my windshield. Well, that's another violation. And these are fines. These aren't warnings for your safety or anything else like that. You pay us, and we are I don't know, we're the people, we're the bill collectors because we can't come out there and honestly say we have a spending habit, and our chief of police and our mayor has just told us through the chain of command that we need to write more tickets.
Yeah, we go through that here in Hawaii.
And my voice and everything else like that, yeah, I do. But I tell the cops the same gosh damn thing. You know, and I tell the cops the same thing all the time. I says, listen, not all cops are bad, but all good cops know of at least
one bad cop, but they can't turn him in because you guys have a fraternal order of police union.
Yes.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a friend who's I have a friend who's a police officer, and I've heard them complain about other officers who are not good, but there's this incredible political pressure to not knock the woodpile over, as it were.
Okay. Well, hey, man, that's all I wanted to say, and God bless you, and Happy New Year, and I hope Clara is doing much better.
Well, I mean, she's doing a lot better today. That was good news that we got yesterday, and we're very delighted and happy about it, and we celebrated last night. Hopefully she's just going to focus on resting and not doing housework, and let her back start to heal. She's still dealing with the pain. She's trying not to overdo the pain medication, but this is unfortunately something that we're going to have to live with for the rest of her life.
Well, Yahweh bless, and I've been praying for both you and Claire, and let's get through this, man, and let's shake hands and have a good old party and throw back a few beers or something like that. How's that sound?
Sounds really, really good. Thanks an awful lot there, and we're going to let you go. We've got two more callers waiting on the line, but I'm going to wait until after the commercial break to bring them on here. Getting on back to human-caused global warming. Apparently, there is this situation up in Minnesota where Xcel Energy is running short of natural gas, and they're literally telling their customers to turn down the thermostat and not try and keep their houses quite so warm during this extreme cold snap here. So, yeah, it's rough over there. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We're going to be back here with a couple of callers on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones to G in Maryland. Aloha, G. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I had two questions. About a year ago, I moved from West Virginia to Maryland, and one of the requirements to get my driver's license was a birth certificate. So, I went ahead and got my driver's license, but one thing that did caught my attention was they got this thing called the Real ID.
Yeah.
And I did a little research on it, and they want certain states to comply by 2020, and some other states they're giving them a little more time. Well, I asked the lady there about it. She said it's to see if you're a citizenship or not, but I didn't understand because if they're already asking for your citizenship, your birth certificate for your driver's license, what is this whole Real ID at? What is that about? I want to know that. And my second question was, you talk about a Soviet-style collapse. If that were to play out like that, the collapse were to play out like that, wouldn't there be some sort of power vacuum? Wouldn't there be certain factions, like corporate factions, trying to hold?
Well, definitely
certain parts of the country.
Definitely, there would be.
I'll let you go on your show.
We'd have to, basically, we have to take our model from the Russian republics and pull something together. Getting on back to the Real ID, it's something I'm surprised they're still out there pushing it, because it does basically have your citizenship on it, and the original idea was to prevent illegals from obtaining employment in this country, and. Of course, right now, I'm sure the Democrats are trying to find some way where it's not going to be implemented, or it's not going to be effective. But that was the original idea behind Real ID, was that you had to have all of this information to confirm that you were born here or you were a legal citizen of this country, and you would have this Real ID card, and it has a lot of information about you on it. But again, it's flying right in the face of the open borders and unlimited immigration people. So I think come 2020, there's probably going to be a bit of an argument about it.
So there's no agenda that the government's trying to do with that. It's just that's what pretty much it's about now.
That's pretty much what it's all about. Is it is an ID that includes your citizenship.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Have a great show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to James in South Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I've been listening to you and some other people talk about, how disappointed everyone is in Trump. Well, I'm kind of disappointed too. However, I don't see that there's an alternative in coming up. If you vote for any Democrat, it will be a terrible thing. I don't know but one Republican that I know of right now, and that's Rand Paul. Now, why would, just on principle, why would you vote against Trump just on principle and have him defeated and have a Democrat put in? When I voted for Trump this past time for the first time since 1976. From there on, I voted for the Libertarian, and I thought the country was going to hell in a handbasket, and I thought I'd waste my vote if I went for the Libertarian. And apparently, the Libertarians were bought off anyway, but so I voted for Trump. I voted because I thought the country was in trouble, and I could not see Hillary Clinton putting in the next 4 Supreme Court justices.
Yes.
I said to myself, if Trump does nothing else, if he sits there and does nothing else, and he puts in halfway decent Supreme Court justices, that justifies his whole existence. And I still believe that. And if you don't vote for Trump, you have to find somebody better than Trump. And I don't see why someone would just sit on the sidelines because they don't like a lot of things Trump's done and get something worse than Trump. I don't think that's appropriate. What say you?
Well, first of all, I think at this point, sensing that there may be an opportunity, I'm expecting a lot of Republicans to leap into the primaries for 2020, and that Donald Trump is going to face a primary challenge to his presidency. And we'll just see, what the field is going to be. It could even be Rand Paul. But at this particular point, the only way that I would support Donald Trump in 2020 is if Hillary ran again, which apparently she's thinking of doing.
You would vote for a known Democrat over Donald Trump?
No, I said the only way I would support Donald Trump is if Hillary Clinton ran again. I would oppose her, just like I did in 2016.
Well, would say if Kamala Harris ran, would you vote for her?
No, I don't think so. I would tend to vote the Republican ticket, but again, I'm not convinced that Trump will even be the nominee. Not the way things are going.
Well, as I say, if he hasn't done anything but nominate halfway decent Supreme Court justices, I think it's worth it. And I'll say the same thing again. If he has a chance to nominate Supreme Court justices, we ought to put him in.
Well,
okay,
my expectation level was a little bit higher than yours because he campaigned on pulling us out of these wars. Now he's starting a new one in Venezuela. He campaigned on vaccine safety. That's pretty much gone away. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing an excellent job trying to deal with that. It's getting no coverage or support from the corporate media. Trump disbanded his Election Integrity Commission. That's gone nowhere. And we saw in the midterms that our election system is still as crooked as a dog's hind leg. And of course, he caved on the wall here. So, Trump is not impressing me as a president. What can I tell you?
Well, I'm very disappointed too. But who do you know that would be better? Who can you point to right now? I think Rand Paul would. But who do you know of the people that are known that would be better than Trump?
Well, ask me toward the end of next year, because I'll be taking a look at the field out there. Rand Paul, yeah, I could see Rand Paul being a good choice out there. Apparently, Bernie Sanders is going to step back in, and might even look at him.
You would vote for Bernie Sanders?
Say again?
You would vote for Bernie Sanders?
I think if Bernie Sanders had won the primary in 2016, I might have voted for him.
That surprises me. He's an out-and-out socialist, and I can't see anyone backing a socialist. I mean,
well, unfortunately, I'm an old-fashioned capitalist, but we're in an era right now where we're being forced to choose between fascism and socialism, and of the two, I'm going to go with socialism.
Well, is there not some way that maybe people of like minds, like the people that listen to your show, could reach out to Trump and say, "Hey, man, we got backing. We'll help you. We'll do something. God knows what it is. I don't know." But is there not some way that people could stand up and say, "Look, we know your heart's in the right place, whether you're having trouble or not, but we'll help you do so and so and so and so"? Is that not possible?
Well, it's certainly possible. Trump reaches out to a lot of people through his Twitter account, and apparently he does read some of the tweets that are posted in reply. But I'm sorry, Trump has failed to measure up. He's shown himself to be a very weak leader, and I'm certainly glad about the conservative Supreme Court justices that we're likely to get over the next 2 years. But in terms of all the other areas, in terms of his achievements, and I know he's been under constant attack by his political enemies, but I would have to say overall, I'm very disappointed in him, and I'm looking for another option come 2020.
Well, I don't see one, with the exception of Rand Paul. I don't see it. And as I say, I had been a libertarian. I'm still a libertarian, but I voted for Trump only because I was afraid that Hillary would get it. Okay, yeah. Michael, I enjoy your show. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open now. Getting on back to human-caused global warming. Story coming on out of SOTT.net. Ice Age Farmer Report, Fatal Cold Incoming. And they're basically, the gist of this article is, it is so cold, it's damaging the food crops, and there may be some serious food shortages going into the spring here. And I notice this article is actually using the phrase the grand solar minimum, which is exactly what we're dealing with here, the grand solar minimum. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. James in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. As far as your conversation with the previous caller about Trump, one problem with a cult of personality, which this, the Trump thing definitely is when it comes to replacing them, it's rather difficult. People are all invested in it. It's kind of like having new video platforms. Everybody's acclimated to YouTube very severely, might say addicted. And the other thing is, yeah, he's the lesser of two evils, but we also have to keep in mind that this lesser of two evils thing is exactly how we got right where we are now. I think I remember Glenn Beck. He was either talking about Romney or McCain. He said, I know how you feel. He said, you've got one sandwich that's all crap, and you've got one sandwich that's half crap, and you have to choose between one or the other. We need to start being opportunists, and I think I'm saying this as a member of the alt-right. I think we need to hammer out a platform with the saner part of the left. They have some. If you watch Jimmy Dore, for instance, he hits the Democrats just as hard on things like being warmongers as much as he hits the Republicans. And you have to keep in mind that people who have strong beliefs, most of them have those beliefs not because they want to do evil, but because they want to do good. So we should be able to hammer out something that we can work with the saner parts of the left on. Even the Muslims have one good idea. They don't lend money for interest unless you're a globalist funded jihadist, militia. So, but I think we need to take a step back and look where we're going to be in 5 years, 10, 20. And I know it's awful fun to fight with the left, but basically it brings to mind various robber barons and financiers have been, the quote's been attributed to them that they could pay half their workers to kill the other half. Well, the people that run this world could pay half the world to kill the other half. So instead of fighting each other, we need to start doing something actually new, because the old ways are not going to work. And that's about all I have to say right now.
Yeah, no, the problem is that in dealing with the left, or at least in dealing with the visible left, the left that we see in the corporate media, they don't want to get together with anybody. They want to basically, they want confrontation. They're basically looking to fight. And
well, I'm talking about people like the Bernie supporters. You remember, you might recall when Trump got the nomination and then Sanders was screwed out of it. I said Trump should offer Sanders the VP slot, because, and what I was thinking was, after the election, he could have made him some kind of a czar and let him institute his policies in a limited way where he was overwhelmingly popular. But that could have been the biggest landslide in all history of elections, and it would have opened a dialogue between the right and the left. I know their economics and their social policies are crazy, but nevertheless, we do need, if we continue like we are, putting all our eggs in one basket, Trump, then we're going to lose everything. So we do need to be creative and opportunistic, just like our overlords are. And I'll say there, that's all I have to say.
all right, well, James, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And the phone lines are open again. Getting on back to human-caused global warming. And the corporate media is still pushing this. They're still pushing it. Popular Science was out there with a banner headline, "Record cold temperatures don't mean the planet isn't warming." Now, I'm sorry, but yeah, we're getting cooler. We are going into the grand solar minimum. The ice volume in the Arctic is at a record high. By what metric does Popular Science think that the planet is warming? See, the problem is, back in the 1990s, when the Earth actually was getting warmer, everybody hopped on board. Al Gore got his people out there. We're going to make lots of money on carbon credits, and they invested a lot of money in scientists to prove human-caused global warming, and the corporate media got enlisted to push the propaganda, and now a lot of them are stuck. I mean, the corporate media is very concerned about its current reputation. People don't trust the corporate media, and they were up to their neck in this human-caused global warming. And so I imagine that's probably the reason why they're out there saying, oh no, the world is still warming. Really, we wouldn't lie to you. They don't want to admit that it was all just a huge, huge fraud, which is exactly what it was. It was a giant fraud. First of all, climate always changes, always has, always will. The human contribution to climate is microscopic. Climate is dominated by that giant ball of fusing hydrogen gas up in the sky, and right now it's in a quiet phase. So this is going to be a rough winter. In fact, they're saying that this current chill, this current vortex, could last another 8 weeks. So it's a serious situation. All right, we're coming up here on our last commercial break. Going to take a break for some commercials here. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today on this Wednesday, hump day, middle of the weekday here. We're talking about human-caused global warming. And apparently over at WDIO, they're talking about how there's a near record cold expected across the Northland Thursday morning. And they're equating it to some of the cold snaps they've had in the past, including 1996. But they're saying it's going to be record-setting temperatures, coldest all-time lows here. Over in Chicago, they're predicting the temperatures are going to plunge to minus 23 degrees. So that's really cold here. Now, as I mentioned before, Arctic sea ice volume right now is the highest of the past decade. And there are only about 90 days a year where ice can melt near the pole. Summer temperatures near the pole have been consistently below normal for the last 20 years. In Antarctica, it's the hottest month of the year. It's their summer. Temperatures down there are below freezing across the entire continent, which means no ice can melt there either. And again, you look at all of this hard information, and then you look at the corporate media like Popular Science, which are out there, still trying to sell you the Kool-Aid. The world is warming, and it's your fault, and you've got to pay carbon taxes, and you've got to let a global environmental authority tell you how to live your life. You know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was out there saying, we only have 12 years left. Good reason to party. Got 12 years to go, let's throw a party. And, you know, quoting the Bible to justify her claims. And it's all about getting money from you. It's all about an excuse to control your life. It's all about pushing the globalist agenda. We've got to take care of the globe. We've got to, you know, make sure the environment is safe. Well, you know, right now, I think the environment is being seriously messed up by all this war all over the planet. I mean, if you really look at it, there's a huge amount of damage being done to planet Earth, especially with these depleted uranium weapons. And nobody talks about that. You know, they're talking about, you know, our plastic bags, and ooh, those are bad. You shouldn't have those in the water, which you shouldn't, let's be honest. But they don't talk about the environmental damage that is coming from the military machine. And that is some serious environmental damage. It's all about guilting you out of money for carbon taxes or to pay for the bags in the supermarkets. I don't know if you have that where you are right now, but here in Hawaii, we have to pay for the bags at the shopping centers, at the supermarkets, 15 cents each, or bring our own. It's supposed to encourage us to bring our own. I always forget. But it's all about the money, and it's all about control. And it is one of the biggest frauds perpetrated on the human race. Anybody who says there's no such thing as a wide-ranging conspiracy to defraud the people, there's one right there. It's called human-caused global warming. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard up there in Vancouver. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please donate to RBN. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Share everything that you learn here with everybody else. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.